great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking a minute out today. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
So let's get into the good work you're doing. And before we do that, I always start with this question. And it's 6 years ago, this pandemic was changing our lives, changing the world. How did you get through that era? And how has it changed the way that you work and live today?
That is a great question. And I think it made me more appreciative of the relationships that I had in my life. Before the pandemic, my husband used to have to travel for work each week. Now he is almost fully remote. So, having him around, making sure I'm very intentional about the relationships I have, and also creating a better sense of boundaries and life balance. Because once I returned to work, I've been in corporate most of my career. I always had to be in an office. Now I've got a hybrid work schedule, 3 days in, 2 days out. And I just value what that does for life balance as well as for reinforcing relationships.
So let's get to the essence of what you do on a daily basis. I'm going to put you in front of a bunch of 13-year-olds. You're at career day, and one of the kids wants you to synthesize your day job to make sense to their brains.
Okay, let me ask you this, Joe. I got 2 day jobs.
Okay?
Okay, so my corporate job, I'm the chief communications officer of a company called National DCP. What you'll know of us is who we support. We are the $3 billion supply chain company supporting Dunkin' Donuts.
Okay.
So we're owned by Dunkin' franchisees. I know one of the reasons we're talking is I'm also a keynote speaker, and I talk about helping companies activate the remarkable in their workforce and helping individuals, leaders, activate their own remarkable and be their best selves.
So how did you get this clairvoyance to be able to do this for clients? What happened to you? What was the defining moment, so to speak, in your life, your career, that has allowed you to have this clairvoyant ability to lead companies to that oasis, so to speak?
I honestly think being vulnerable and um, being hit with some really hard circumstances enabled me to be even more empathetic to others and to recognize the potential to be remarkable that every single person has inside of them. And ironically, it took a business failure during the Great Recession that allowed me to, realize we all aren't here to seem perfect. When we embrace our authentic selves is when we can really shine, activate our remarkable, and do the same for our teams and everyone else in our lives.
So when you were 13 years old and you were at career day, what was your dream job? What did you want to grow up and become?
Okay, 13, at that time, I still was holding on to the dream of being something I called a space engineer. And that would be someone who would design the rocket ships and then pilot them into outer space as an astronaut. And then I think it was eighth grade math that killed that dream. But at that point, 13, I was still like, sure. I'm in the generation that grew up with, being fascinated with astronauts and outer space. So, yes.
So it has to have happened somewhere in Elon Musk's life where he still believes in that and won't let that go. Because that's exactly what he's trying to do with going to outer space and Mars and all of this stuff. It's like we have to have those people that embrace algebra and math and all of those high level things so that we can do this. We can see it be a possibility. Now, whether or not we'll see it in our lifetimes, because how long would it take to get to Mars? It would take an incredible amount of time.
And it's really a one-way ticket
It
once you get
is.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it. You're not coming home, you know?
No, you're not. Did you see Project Hail Mary?
Ah,
Oh my gosh, that movie was amazing. Ryan Gosling, it came out back in April, one of the best movies I've seen in forever. And it's about a mission to save Earth, honestly, by going into outer space. It's so uplifting and wonderful.
I've seen previews. I need to see that because I love those kinds of space things. I'm into it. So let me ask you this. Take me back to your beginnings. Are you from Atlanta originally?
I am from Columbia, South Carolina.
Okay.
I am the daughter of a delicatessen owner. And I grew up, I was in Columbia until I left to go to college in Atlanta, and that's what brought me here.
So what were the early seeds that were planted, whether it was family or what you saw around you that have allowed you to have this career, to let people to lead people to find their true essence? How did this happen?
I don't think I was conscious of it at the time, but when I was in high school, I competed on our debate team, public speaking, extemporaneous speaking, and I found myself in the position. Our coach left, and I'm just 16 years old myself, and I ended up coaching the younger people on the team, and I was really struck by their potential. I was able to, really see who they were as individuals, as teens, and help them unlock what was special. And a lot of them went on to also win state championships and do things. And I loved it. I absolutely loved seeing their potential and then helping them realize what was remarkable and activate it. And in that way, it was through the element of public speaking. They all have gone on to do wonderful things in the world. It's funny, 40 years later, I had a guy reach out from New York. He lives there, and he sent me a thank you note. He goes, "You coached me in high school, and I ended up, being successful in government because of it." It just, cracked me up to hear it, but gosh, it meant a lot. I mean, I got all verklempt.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's where I think it began and then continued to grow. I was a resident advisor in college, and then I started my corporate career and became very passionate about employee recognition. My first corporate job was at Days Inns of America, the corporate headquarters, and I created their employee recognition initiatives. This is back in, the early 90s, and that's always been something I have just been so excited about. Culture, people development.
Yeah, it's huge though. I mean, especially in corporate America. I know when I worked in there, it just seemed like sometimes it was those old antiquated Orwellian films where everybody was just kind of going in and out and there wasn't anything different. Every day was kind of Groundhog Day. So anytime, people can get recognized, it's big. So I'm curious from a speaking standpoint, speeches can change and transform people in drastic ways. What's one of the best speeches that you've ever witnessed? Whether televised or in person, that was amazing.
My gosh, that's a great question. Best speeches that I've ever witnessed. You know, talk about the great communicator. And this has nothing to do with politics, but when I was at Days Inns, we had Ronald Reagan right after he came out of office. He came and he spoke at our national conference, and he had such a message of hope and unity. And the audience was literally, everyone was in the palm of his hand. And he
Mhm.
talked about travel and tourism and hospitality. I mean, that was the industry, but we were transfixed. And it was because it felt that he genuinely saw us
Yep.
and took the time to understand us and then craft a message that was not only motivating and inspiring, but really strategically on point as well.
As a Gen Xer growing up in the 80s, I remember when he would give speeches after calamities, and he had a few assassination attempts. And when the Challenger happened, I remember
Yes.
that night when he had that speech where he said they all went up and kissed the face of the heavens or God or something along. There was all these little eloquent lines that he was putting in there, but he had this way of comforting and making us feel like leadership was valid and we needed that, and it's void, I think, with what the world we're living in now. But I remember 20 years ago, I got tickets to see Bill Clinton at the Harry S. Truman Museum here, and that was crazy. The doors swung open like a State of the Union, and every single particle in that room just went into a different frenzy. I remember all kinds of things he talked about solar panels on Brooklyn high rises. There was all of these wonderful ideas, and I still remember 20 years later, like he was speaking in front of me right now, and it's like those are the marks of really good communicators that can like get your attention and make you remember.
It's so true. And even with the example of Reagan, I'm such a big fan now. He's an amazing communicator, but a lot of his words are coming from a woman named Peggy Noonan, who now,
Okay.
his speechwriter, who now writes for the Wall Street Journal. And she has one of my favorite columns. And so just going back and, how eloquently she's looking at what's happening in our culture and society. He was the deliverer of the message that she helped craft. But yeah, she's one of my favorite voices of trying to bring people together during this disjointed time.
Yeah. So who's been your hero? Who's been that inspirational force that's allowed you to navigate through your career, both corporate and what you're doing also in conjunction with that? Who has been that force for you?
I've been lucky enough to have several forces. The first I'm going to name has nothing to do with corporate, and it is my mother. She is an incredibly resilient woman. I am so grateful she's still on this earth. She's 88, really spry and smart. And my mother is a woman who she didn't go to college. She always felt a little bit less than for not going to college, but one of the smartest, most capable people I've ever met. And she was a voice of encouragement when I was growing up. And there weren't a lot of voices like that, but when I got into Emory, she said, "Of course you're going to go there." I would when I would win speaking trophies, I would find new ways to hide them. So I'd go home and mom would say, "How did you do?" And then I'd be like, "Not so great, just this." And pull it out of my suitcase. And she's just someone who was an incredible cheerleader. She would find the positive and smart and just a great connector of people, a very good listener.
Yeah. So if you could meet one person alive on the planet right now, whether it's a leader or it's an entrepreneur, a wonderful mind that you could have lunch with and that might help you on your journey with what you're doing, your work, who would you love to meet?
Oh my gosh, the first person that comes to my mind isn't necessarily in my field, but she's in yours, Amy Poehler.
Yeah, absolutely.
Obsessed. I've always been a huge fan. My husband's nickname for me is Leslie Nope. Because that was one of
Parks
my
and Rec.
favorite shows, and I'm an optimistic person who does believe the best in people. And I love the Good Hang podcast. So I would just like to hang out and talk to her and
Yeah.
shoot the breeze and, talk about how do we bring people together.
Yeah, that was that show was so good and that whole cast like magic, absolute magic. Yeah. So let me ask you this. In your career, there's a lot of things that we have to do that can be risky, that decisions we have to make. When you look back on your career, what's the biggest risk that you've taken?
The biggest risk that I have taken was um, believing in myself when others didn't. And this goes back to, let's say, 2013, 14. I had a public relations firm, won a lot of awards. We had big name clients, but then during the Great Recession, 200,000 small businesses went under. I barely kept mine going. I had to let go of people, had a lot of debt. And after I paid all of that off, it took years, I realized because of my interest in human potential, I became a certified executive coach and realized I want to go back into corporate. And so many people said, "No, no, no, no. You've built your own business. Why would you stop being an entrepreneur?" And I said, if I get back in corporate, I can impact a culture. I can test all these theories of things I've been doing and learning. And I got the opportunity with this job. I've been here since fall of 2014, and I'm glad I listened to myself and not naysayers.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. What is that energy for you every day to wake up to do both of the jobs that you have at a high level? Take care of your soul, everyone around you, all of this holistically. What gets you up in the morning?
What gets me up in the morning is the chance to make a difference. And I am a morning person. I wasn't born that way. I intentionally became that way 30 years ago. So I get up, I exercise, I walk my dog, I do all these high energy things way before most people, hit their alarm clock. And I just feel like today could be a great day. Today I can make a difference. And that's really motivating for me.
What comes to mind when you think about retirement? How does that work for you? Is it something that you embrace? What's your vision of when you finally get to that retirement point?
People think I'm crazy because I have a C-suite job and I'm building this keynote speaking practice, which is really taking off. So my definition of retirement is just doing one of my two jobs and really going all in on the keynote speaking and doing, 30, 40 engagements a year. So when I think of retirement, I think it's just going to be in phases. Later in my 60s, it'll be full-time speaking, and then that will morph. I'll probably write more books. I published one several years ago, and I think I'll always try to be learning and growing and making a difference. And what I'm going to be doing at 65 will be different than when I'm 80 or 85. So it'll just be an evolution.
Absolutely. So let me ask you this. If you had a dream tonight, ran into the 18-year-old version of you You walked into a room and there was a film projector. You click play, a 60-second highlight reel of your life comes up on the wall. Is that young version of you going to believe your life turned out this way?
She would be blown away. She would be, oh my gosh, you did that? Wow, you're this big company. You're doing the speaking. You always love the speaking. You're, paid on stages all around the country. She'd be blown away by that. She would be surprised that, if the personal story. So met the love of my life when I was 42. We don't have kids. We got fur babies. She would be shocked I'm not a mom of children. But she would be beyond, yay, Shira, look what you did. You
Yeah.
didn't build a rocket ship and pilot it into outer space, but gosh, you're making a difference with lots of people, and that's phenomenal.
So, in that highlight reel, what are you the proudest of, the happiest about?
What I'm the proudest about, it's an inside thing, is how I embrace being my authentic self. So when you and I enter the workforce, we were expected to be, quote, perfect. Everything had to just be bright and shiny a certain way. And I realized, after the business failure and all these different things all those years ago, I'm just going to be my authentic self. It's important for me. And I believe more people need to see that in corporate. They need to see it in entrepreneurship. And that's what I'm most proud of because my greatest successes came when I would show up in a meeting and be the one to be brave enough to say something nobody else wanted to speak up about, or to be the one to diffuse a tense situation with a goofy joke. Hey, Leslie, nope. And that came from being completely authentic.
So, if you could get into a time machine and go back in time and see one event in human history with your own eyes, what would you love to have seen happen?
Oh gosh, you're asking a history major. I can't, let me think. Okay, an event in history. Oh, I think it would have been cool to be in the control tower. We have a theme here today. In the control tower in NASA
Huh?
when astronauts walked on the moon,
Yeah, that would be awesome.
right?
That would be
Yeah, to see
totally
something like
intense.
that. I mean, I was, too young when it was televised in what, 69. Yeah,
Yeah.
I don't remember any of that. But gosh, to be able to see that or be able to be in contact with the astronauts doing that, that would have been amazing.
Well, and another thing we talked about is sports and FIFA. And I remember my dad had pictures of taking pictures of the TV, an old Zenith on like the legs coming out. And he's just taking pictures of the TV while it's happening. Like there was such a fervor that was going on then. I mean, 69 was already an explosive year historically for this country. And then to add on top of going to the moon was just another level of it. So, Shira, let me ask you this. Everyone has a perception of you, family, friends, clients, everyone that knows you in different capacities, but you run the show. What's your perception of you? Who do you think you are?
I am the kind of person that if I met, I would want to be friends with. I genuinely am curious about people and their dreams and their hopes and helping them overcome challenges. I'm loyal. Think I'm, well, it depends on the topic. I'm smart about most things. Just don't give me anything with math or technology. Um, love a good laugh, open-minded. Um, yeah, that's how I would describe myself.
I love it. So let me ask you this. You've been in corporate culture, you've been around, you analyze how companies can be better. I'm curious, what company do you admire that's happening right now from the top down, from good leadership, a product that people come back to, employee frivolity, fun, happiness, productivity, from like the whole umbrella of a company. What company do you admire that does it right?
I'm going to give you an example that you haven't heard of because I just spoke to them and got to learn a lot about their culture. And the company is HEI Hotels and Resorts. They're based in Connecticut. They are a huge private investor. They manage like over 100 properties, some of the biggest names hotels in the US. And what really impressed me is the level of care and recognition that they try to focus on for every single employee. They've got about 15,000 people on their workforce. They just had me keynote their women's leadership conference for my Own the Remarkable speech, and just digging into what they were doing and the impact they were having on so many leaders and employees, it blew me away.
Yeah, that's amazing. So if anybody is ready for the next step, they want to dive into your world, they want to get involved with what you're doing, how do they do that? Where's the best place to go?
Two places. The best place is my website, and that is Shira, Shira Miller.com. And I've lots of content, lots of articles, quizzes you can take, lots of free content. Also, follow me on LinkedIn. It's
Okay.
the Shira Miller. That's my social URL for all. Yes, there's a couple of other Shira Millers.
Yeah.
I had to put that be there. And I've got a lot of information. I put out videos, and that's probably the best place to start to engage. And I love sharing tips that can help any organization, whether you got 5 people or you've got 50,000. It's some real actionable tips that you can use to help people feel seen, create a positive culture, and create growth opportunities that will transform your culture.
Wonderful. I will put all these links in the show notes. This has been absolutely great. Great to meet you. Thank you for your story. Thank you for your time, and best of luck with everything.
Thank you. This has been a wonderful experience.
Yes, thank you.